This is a rich passage. We could take this in a lot of directions, but for this morning, there's 2 points I'm going to make out of this. And really, it's like 2 different sermons, but they're both pretty good, so hang with me on this. Two different sermons. Sermon number 1. I want us to notice the gracious way that Jesus interacts with this woman. It's just beautiful. He gets his word of knowledge about her, that she's had 5 husbands. Kind of humorously draws it out of her. Go get your husband. He's setting her up. Go get your husband. I don't have a husband. Well, that's true. You've had 5, and the person you're with now is not your husband. Now, that would raise eyebrows in just about every culture throughout history, but in first century Jewish culture and Samaritan culture, and by the way, the Samaritans were just as strict ethically and in terms of their orthodoxy as the Jews were. In that culture, this would have been incredibly scandalous. In fact, I have never found anything like this in the ancient literature. A person married 5 times and then living with somebody who's not her husband, when the culture is so much against it. It's shocking. I mean, to be divorced once was shocking. To be divorced 5 times, that was just unheard of. Now, what you need to know is that in this culture, women couldn't divorce the men. Only the men could divorce the women. It's a sexist culture. The only women who could initiate a divorce in the ancient world was very wealthy Gentile women. But among Jews and Samaritans, it couldn't happen. And when they were divorced, when a woman was put out, is how they would put it, the guy would just kick her out, it always fell on the woman. It's a sexist culture. She was blamed for it. The assumption is you couldn't even please a man. You weren't a good wife. There's something defective with you, something wrong with you. It was a stigma on her. Not only was it a stigma on her, but it tainted her. The minute you were divorced, the pool of people you could marry shrunk considerably because most decent, high, upright, Orthodox Jewish guys and Samaritan guys, they'd only marry a virgin. And so the pool of people you could draw from just got smaller and kind of went down a couple notches because the kind of guys who are going to marry you are not going to be the upright types. And so this lady to be divorced 5 times, well, there'd be a perception that she must really be a terrible, terrible lady who burns up 5 husbands. That's ridiculous. And now, if she's living with a guy out of wedlock, that was of itself scandalous. And so she'd be considered loose on top of this. Very defective and very loose. In fact, the fact that she could even get a second husband, and then a third, and then a fourth, and a fifth. Why do guys keep on wanting to marry her? She must have had something going for her. She's got so much going against her. Something had to overcome that for these guys. And it either was that she was very rich, which wouldn't be the case. Samaritans tend to be very, very poor. Or she was really hot. And so I suspect she was a really good-looking gal, and so she could keep getting married even though she kept on getting unmarried. All right. This kind of explains why she's at the well at noon and why she's alone. The way that you would do it in the ancient world, women hardly ever traveled by themselves. Among other things, it was dangerous. They would always travel in packs. And what villages would typically do is in the morning, when the first duties of the women was to take their water jars and go out to the well and gather the day's water. And they would do it first thing in the morning because it's a very hot region. And so it's less work and less sweat to do it in the morning. And the water's going to be cooler. Here, this lady is alone, not with a group, and she's there at noon when no one else is going to be there because this is the hottest time of the day. What that tells us is that this lady was ostracized, which isn't surprising. With this kind of past and living with a guy in the present, decent women wouldn't be wanting to hang out with her. She wouldn't have any friends. She was rejected by this town. She's here alone. So then Jesus calls out this past and this present. I know you. I know everything about you. But notice this. Despite what a scandal that would be in this culture, Jesus doesn't have a hint of condemnation. Not a hint. He doesn't call her out and say, shame on you, wicked woman, sinner, nothing. He just calls it out. And then when she wants to change the subject, he goes with it. It's just there. But he does it because he wants to show her that he is the Messiah. And he does it because he's saying to her, lady, I know everything about you, and I knew that when I offered you that water. That offer's still on the table. Lady, I know everything about you, and it doesn't affect in the least my desire to help you. I know everything about you, and what the society thinks about you. But I want you to know that this doesn't at all affect my love for you, my concern for you, my desire to quench your thirst. I know everything about you, which means I also know about your pain, and I know about your rejection, and how you have been judged, and how you've been hurt. I know everything about you, including the thirst that drives you. This is what Jesus is getting at. He calls it out not to judge her, but to help her by showing his concern for her and wanting to get to that thirst that's in the core of her being. What Jesus knows and what we need to always remember is that everything that this woman ever did was driven by the same thirst that drives everybody. But whatever else happened with those 5 marriages and her decision to live with this guy, she's driven by a thirst.